A lone rider thunders through the moonlit desert, carrying a secret for the king's eyes only. This was the nerve center of the Achaemenid Empire, a realm so vast and powerful it stretched from the sands of Egypt to the mountains of India. Yet for all its glory, this ancient superpower left behind puzzles that have defied explanation for 2,500 years. By the end of this journey, you will uncover 25 of history's most tantalizing cold cases, from armies swallowed by storms to inscriptions carved for gods. We will piece together the fate of a vanished royal brother and ask why a conqueror burned a palace of wonders. What is the one mystery from a fallen empire you hope will never be solved? The first mystery is a story of divine wrath and a force of nature. It begins with a king's rage. After conquering Egypt, the Achaemenid ruler Cambyses II sent envoys to the distant and sacred oracle of Ammon at the Siwa oasis. The priests there refused to legitimize his rule, a profound insult to a conqueror. In response, Cambyses dispatched a massive army, 50,000 strong, from the city of Thebes with a single, brutal order to march across the desert and reduce the oracle to dust. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote about this decades later, the army never arrived. As the soldiers trudged through the endless sea of sand, a ferocious wind rose from the south. Herodotus describes a monstrous sandstorm, a wall of choking, blinding dust that rose to the heavens. When the wind finally died down, the entire army was gone. Not a man, not a weapon, not a trace remained. 50,000 souls were simply erased, swallowed whole by the desert as if they had never existed. For centuries, this was accepted as a cautionary tale about hubris and the power of the gods. But could 50,000 men truly vanish without a single clue? Modern searches have turned up tantalizing fragments. In the late 1990s, a team of archaeologists claimed to find a mass grave in the western desert, filled with hundreds of skeletons, along with Persian arrowheads and a silver bracelet. Another theory suggests the army never aimed for Siwa at all, but took a fatal wrong turn into the vast and waterless Great Sand Sea, perishing from thirst and exposure in a desolate labyrinth of dunes. The desert guards its secrets well, and the final fate of Cambyses' lost legion remains one of history's most enduring ghost stories. Was it a cataclysm of weather, a tragic error in navigation, or something else entirely that silenced 50,000 voices? That vanished army is a testament to the desert's power, but the death of the very man who forged the empire is cloaked in its own historical fog. The founder, Cyrus the Great, met his end in the year 530 BC, and how it happened depends entirely on who you ask. Our primary guide, Herodotus, tells a dramatic and personal tale. Cyrus, in his final campaign against the nomadic Massageti tribe, is said to have captured their queen's son. The son, in shame, took his own life. Enraged, Queen Tomyris led her forces against Cyrus, and in a fierce battle, the Persian king was killed. Herodotus claims Tomyris then located Cyrus's body, severed his head, and plunged it into a wineskin filled with blood, declaring a grim prophecy fulfilled that she would give him his fill of blood. It is a story of vengeance and poetic justice, perfect for a Greek historian's narrative. Yet a far more contemporary source, the Babylonian Nabonidus Chronicle, tells a different, drier story. This administrative clay tablet simply records that Cyrus fought the Massageti, that his army was defeated, and that he died. It mentions no queen, no grisly trophy, just the stark fact of a military loss and a king's death in battle. So which is true? Was it a heroic fall in combat or a specific, brutal execution ordered by a grieving mother? The mystery deepens at his final resting place. In the windswept plain of Pasargadae in modern Iran stands a remarkably simple stone structure, a gabled tomb resting on a stepped platform. Ancient sources, including the Greek writer Arrian, claim it bore the inscription, "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the empire of the Persians." For centuries, it was believed Alexander the Great paid his respects here, but a haunting question remains: was this tomb ever violated? Despite its apparent vulnerability, some historians argue it may have been secretly protected by local guardians for generations, its austere dignity preserving not just a body, but the enduring mystery of the king's final moments. Could the truth be something neither source recorded, a quiet illness, or even a political assassination masked by the chaos of war? The Cyrus Cylinder, his famous declaration of tolerance, tells us how he wished to rule, but the silence surrounding his death speaks volumes about how empires shape and sometimes obscure the ends of their founders. Even the resting place of Cyrus the Great holds fewer questions than one of his most celebrated legacies, a small clay object no bigger than a loaf of bread. Discovered in Babylon in 1879, the Cyrus Cylinder is often hailed as a revolutionary document, the first charter of human rights. Its cuneiform text, written in Akkadian, tells of Cyrus's peaceful entry into Babylon, his condemnation of the previous rulers' impiety, and his remarkable decrees. He claims to have returned captured gods to their sanctuaries, allowed displaced peoples like the Jews to go home, and restored temples across Mesopotamia. It is a powerful narrative of a benevolent conqueror, but here lies the core mystery: were these proclamations a genuine blueprint for tolerant rule, or something more calculated? Many scholars see it as brilliant statecraft, a pragmatic propaganda piece aimed squarely at the priests and elites of newly conquered Babylon. By styling himself as a restorer of divine order, chosen by the Babylonian god Marduk, Cyrus secured his legitimacy and stabilized his empire with remarkable efficiency. The text itself follows a long tradition of Mesopotamian foundation deposits, stones or cylinders placed in building corners to commemorate a king's piety. In this light, Cyrus was not inventing a new philosophy, but expertly using an old template for a new audience. Yet, the specific promises he made, particularly the repatriation of exiled communities, had profound and real effects, as recorded in the Hebrew Bible's Book of Ezra. This duality is what makes the cylinder so fascinating. It is both a masterstroke of political propaganda and a policy that created tangible human relief. The mystery deepens in the modern era, where the artifact has been wielded as a symbol. In 1971, the United Nations translated it into all official languages, enshrining it as an ancient icon of human dignity. The last Shah of Iran used it to bolster his imperial legacy, while the Islamic Republic later embraced it as a testament to Iran's historic civilization. This small cylinder, then, carries the weight of multiple interpretations, an ancient message continually reshaped for contemporary needs. Was Cyrus a visionary ahead of his time, or simply the most adept practitioner of an age-old formula for power? The answer may be both, and that is what keeps this humble piece of baked clay at the center of a debate spanning millennia. High on a sheer limestone cliff in western Iran, a silent king addresses the gods. This is the Behistun inscription, a colossal billboard carved over 2,500 years ago, and its story is one of audacious propaganda and breathtaking human effort. Commissioned by Darius the Great, the relief shows him triumphant, his foot upon the chest of a rebel pretender named Gaumata, with a line of 9 other bound captives before him. Towering above them all is the figure of the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda, his winged disc a divine endorsement of the king's rule. But the true power of Behistun lies not in its images but in its words. The same narrative is carved in 3 different cuneiform scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, a trilingual key to the ancient world. In over 1,200 lines, Darius tells his version of events, how he, with the grace of Ahura Mazda, crushed a year of rebellions across the empire to secure his rightful throne. He names the liars and the impostors, detailing their defeats, and ends with a stern warning to future generations against deceit and revolt. The sheer scale is staggering. The panel sits nearly 300 feet above the ground on an inaccessible rock face. This immediately presents the central puzzle: who was ever meant to read it? No ordinary citizen could climb up to study the text, and from the ground, the intricate cuneiform would be just a blur of lines. Was it a message for the gods themselves, a permanent record etched into the very bones of the earth? Or was it a symbolic act, its very inaccessibility proving the king's power to command the impossible? The inscription declares it was made so that the future may know, but for over 23 centuries it remained a silent, enigmatic monument, its secrets locked away in an undeciphered script. That changed in the 1830s and 40s, thanks to the perilous work of a British Army officer, Sir Henry Rawlinson. With little more than ropes, ladders, and sheer determination, Rawlinson repeatedly scaled the treacherous cliff to make papier-mâché casts of the inscriptions. His most famous assistant was a local Kurdish boy who, legend says, was lowered from above to reach the most dangerous sections. By painstakingly comparing the three scripts, starting with the known names of kings in Old Persian, Rawlinson performed an intellectual feat as daring as his climbs. He cracked the code of cuneiform, unlocking not just Darius's boasts but the entire history of Mesopotamia. The Behistun inscription, therefore, holds a double mystery: the ancient enigma of its intended audience and the modern drama of the man who finally gave it a voice. Was it a divine communique, a political manifesto for the elite who could send scribes to copy it, or simply a king's ego carved in stone for eternity? The cliff does not answer, but because of one man's courage, we can at last read the question. The stone words of Behistun were meant to travel, but the empire's true voice moved with the speed of hoofbeats. Stretching from the glittering palaces of Susa to the shores of the Aegean Sea was the Royal Road, a highway of compacted earth and stone that spanned over 1,500 miles, the superhighway of its age. This was the nervous system of the empire, and its lifeblood was a corps of elite messengers known as the predecessor, the royal couriers. Their reputation was immortalized centuries later by the Greek historian Herodotus, who gave us the phrase that would one day define a modern postal service: that neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. But how did this system truly function? The logistical mystery is staggering. To maintain the legendary speeds Herodotus describes, a message could travel the entire length of the road in just 7 days. The system must have been a masterpiece of coordination. The prevailing theory, supported by archaeological traces of way stations, is one of relentless relay. A single courier would not ride the entire distance. Instead, he would carry his sealed dispatches at a gallop to the next station, perhaps every 15 or 20 miles, where a fresh horse and a rested rider waited. The message would be passed like a baton, never stopping day and night. But what did these stations look like? Were they fortified posts with stables and barracks, or simple huts with a corral? The exact routes are another puzzle. The Royal Road was not a single paved lane, but a maintained corridor with variations, likely shifting with the seasons and political needs. Animated maps might show it snaking through mountain passes, crossing rivers on pontoon bridges, and cutting across arid plains. Visualize a rider cloaked against the dust, his face set with determination, pushing through the gloom of night with only the stars and the known rhythm of his horse to guide him. The Persian landscape itself, from lush valleys to stark salt deserts, becomes a character in this mystery. Could the system have been as flawless as the Greeks believed? The phrase speaks to an ideal, a propaganda of imperial efficiency. In reality, blizzards in the Anatolian highlands or flash floods in the river valleys must have caused delays. Bandits may have lurked in remote stretches. The mystery of the predecessor is not whether they existed, but how they achieved the near-mythical reliability that so impressed their enemies. It was a feat of administration that turned geography into a weapon of control. ensuring a king in Persepolis could taste the salt of the Aegean in a report barely a week old. What message was so urgent it demanded such a breathtaking, relentless pace? While the couriers were the empire's swift nerves, its iron fist was a unit of 10,000 men known only as the Immortals. Herodotus gave them that name, and it has echoed through history, shrouded in a tantalizing ambiguity. Were these elite royal guards literally immortal? The most practical explanation is a marvel of military logistics. Their number, a perfect 10,000, was said to never diminish. The moment a soldier fell ill, was wounded or killed, a pre-trained replacement from a dedicated reserve would immediately step into the ranks, creating the illusion of an undying, perpetual force. This was a psychological weapon as much as a military one, a demonstration of the empire's boundless resources and relentless, unchanging power. But the name might cut deeper, hinting at a spiritual dimension. In the Zoroastrian faith that influenced Persian kings, concepts of eternal life and divine reward for the righteous were powerful. Could the name Immortals have been an honorific, a promise of glory in this life and the next for those who served the king, the shadow of Ahura Mazda on earth? Their effectiveness was no mystery. They were not just heavy infantry, but a versatile, professional standing army in an era of conscripts. Historical reconstructions show them in a stunning uniform, their robes richly dyed, their spears tipped with silver or gold pomegranates, their wicker shields forming an unbreakable wall. They were a spectacle of imperial might, designed to awe as much as to fight. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, it was the Immortals whom King Xerxes sent on the flanking march through the mountain trail to surround the Spartan rear guard, a tactical move that required discipline and endurance, not just brute force. This is where the mystery truly crystallizes, because almost everything we know about them comes from Greek sources, primarily Herodotus, who saw them as the terrifying embodiment of Persian despotism. The Persian sources themselves, the royal inscriptions and administrative tablets, are utterly silent on a unit by this specific name. They speak of the apple-bearers, the royal spear-bearers, an elite corps, but the poetic title Immortals is absent from their own records. This creates a fascinating gap. Were the Greeks describing a real unit but giving it a nickname born of their own fear and fascination? Or was this Persian propaganda so effective that even their enemies adopted the terrifying brand? The modern image is further complicated by Hollywood, with films like 300 depicting them as monstrous, masked demons, a far cry from the historical picture of an elite professional guard. The real enigma of the Immortals lies in this space between perception and reality, between the terrifying legend crafted by their adversaries and the silent, efficient machinery of the empire they served. They were a living illusion, 10,000 men maintaining the perfect, unchanging face of power, and their true name died with the last man who served in their unbroken line. The legend of the Immortals served a king whose own claim to power was built upon a story of deception and murder. In the year 522 BC, the empire was plunged into chaos by the sudden death of King Cambyses II in Syria. With no clear heir present, the throne passed to his brother, a man known as Bardiya, but his reign was shockingly brief. Within months, a noble named Darius with 6 co-conspirators stormed the palace and killed the new king. Darius then ascended the throne and carved his justification into the cliff face at Behistun. He claims the man he killed was not Bardiya at all, but a cunning impostor, a magus named Gaumata, who had seized power while the real prince was secretly murdered years before on his brother's orders. This is the official history, the story of a righteous king saving the empire from a usurper. But from the moment those words were etched in stone, a shadow of doubt fell across them. The central, gripping mystery is this: did Darius heroically expose a devastating fraud, or did he invent the entire tale of the impostor to cover up his own bloody coup against the legitimate king? Darius's version is detailed and dramatic, On the Behistun relief, he stands with his foot upon the prostrate figure of Gaumata, the ultimate liar. The inscription describes how this magus, who bore a striking resemblance to the missing Bardia, deceived the people and seized the throne. Darius, chosen by the god Ahura Mazda, led the righteous conspiracy to restore order. It is a clean, morally justified narrative, yet almost immediately whispers of another story emerge. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing decades later, records a persistent rumor that the man Darius killed was in fact the genuine Bardia. If true, then Darius was not a savior but a regicide, and his entire inscription is one of history's most successful pieces of political propaganda, a lie carved into a mountain to legitimize a usurper. Why would anyone doubt the king's own word? The motives are clear and human. Bardia, according to some accounts, had begun his short reign by granting tax remissions and cancelling military drafts, policies that would have made him popular with the common people but threatened the privileges of the noble class, the very men Darius rallied to his cause. By painting Bardia as an impostor, Darius could justify his murder and win over those who feared the new king's reforms. Furthermore, the story that Cambyses had secretly killed his own brother years earlier is almost too convenient, a perfect way to explain why the real Bardia could not come forward to dispute the claim. There is no independent evidence for this secret murder, only Darius's assertion. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The assassination did not bring peace, it ignited a firestorm. For over a year, rebellions erupted across the empire, from Babylon to Media to Persia itself, as satraps and local kings refused to accept Darius's version of events. This was the year of the false kings Darius boasts of crushing on the Behistun inscription, but these widespread revolts suggest many across the realm believed they were fighting for the rightful king, not an impostor. The civil war was a desperate struggle for the empire's soul, a direct result of the murky events in that palace. Visualize the tense, shadowy corridors of the royal fortress, the conspirators moving with silent purpose, the sudden violence in the throne room. Then picture the sweeping landscapes of the empire erupting into war, as the question of one man's true identity set the world ablaze. Ultimately, we are left with two irreconcilable truths. One is carved in stone for eternity. The other lives in the whispers of history, in the logical doubts of motive and the chaos that followed. Did Darius save the Achaemenid dynasty from a cunning magus, or did he found his own royal line on a foundation of fratricide and a brilliantly crafted lie? The stone at Behistun offers an answer, but the silence of the dead prince asks a more troubling question. The shadow of a murdered prince gave way to the torch of a conqueror. 190 years after Darius solidified his rule, a new force swept across the empire, a young Macedonian king named Alexander. In the winter of 330 BC, he stood before the gates of Persepolis, the magnificent ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid kings. For months, its treasury had been plundered, a fortune so vast it required thousands of mules and camels to carry it away. Then, after a lavish feast, the unthinkable happened. Fire erupted within the palace complex. Flames climbed the colossal columns, devouring the cedar ceilings, melting the gold and silver ornamentation, and reducing exquisite reliefs to cracked limestone. The great hall of 100 columns, the monumental stairways adorned with processions of tribute bearers, the very heart of Persian imperial display, was consumed. But why? The burning of Persepolis remains one of antiquity's most debated acts of destruction, a mystery of motive that splits historians to this day. The ancient sources themselves are in conflict, offering three starkly different explanations. The most dramatic comes from the biographer Plutarch, who tells a story of reckless passion. He describes a wild banquet where the Athenian courtesan Thais, caught in the fervor of the celebration, urged Alexander to set the fire as poetic revenge for the Persian burning of the Athenian Acropolis 150 years prior. In this version, a drunken Alexander, egged on by the crowd, seized a torch and led a riotous procession to the palace, turning a night of revelry into an act of catastrophic vandalism. It is a compelling image of impulse and intoxication, yet the historian Arrian, relying on more contemporary accounts, presents a far more calculated rationale. He suggests it was a deliberate political decision. By destroying the symbolic center of Achaemenid power, Alexander was sending an unmistakable message to the entire empire and to his own restless troops. The war of revenge was over, the Persian king was finished, there would be no return to the old order. This was not an accident of wine, but a sober statement etched in fire. A third, more nuanced possibility blends these ideas. Perhaps the initial idea was whispered as revenge, but Alexander, ever the strategic genius, recognized its political utility in the moment and allowed it to happen, transforming a chaotic gesture into a powerful symbol. Visualize the scene. Majestic ruins of fluted columns still stand today against the Iranian sky, hinting at the scale of what was lost. Computer reconstructions can show us the soaring roofs, the vibrant paint on the sculptures, the sheer overwhelming grandeur designed to humble every visitor. Dramatic paintings often capture the inferno, with Alexander a tiny figure before a wall of flame. But the true loss is incalculable. In those flames vanished untold archives, works of art, and the intimate material culture of the court. We will never know what records of administration, of daily life, or of earlier history were turned to ash that night. The fire at Persepolis, therefore, is more than a question of sober policy versus drunken folly. It is a window into the mind of a conqueror at a crossroads. Was he a man still driven by the emotional propaganda of a Greek revenge war, or had he already begun to think of himself as the new great king of Asia, using destruction to clear the ground for his own legacy? The blackened stones do not say, leaving us to wonder whether history's most decisive breaks are made by cold calculation or by a single, fateful spark. The ashes of Persepolis cooled, but Alexander's fascination with the empire he destroyed only deepened. He began to dress in Persian royal robes, adopted court ceremonies, and even married a Persian princess. In death, this connection may have become permanent. The fate of Alexander the Great's body is one of history's greatest missing persons cases, but a lesser-known thread ties it directly to the Achaemenids. After he died in Babylon in 323 BC, his general Ptolemy seized the magnificent funeral carriage and diverted it to Egypt. Alexander was eventually entombed in Alexandria, where his glass-covered coffin became a tourist attraction for Roman emperors. Then, around the 4th century AD, the tomb vanished from all reliable records. The enduring search has focused on Egypt, but a compelling theory suggests we should look east, back toward the heart of the old Persian Empire. Ancient writers like Arrian note that Alexander admired Cyrus the Great profoundly, visiting his tomb at Pasargadae and ordering its restoration. Some accounts suggest Alexander wished to be buried in a similar fashion. Could his successors, honoring his deep respect for Persian kingship, have secretly interred him in a former Achaemenid royal necropolis? The stark, dignified tomb of Cyrus stands as a clear architectural precedent. Alternatively, the ruined but still sacred site of Persepolis, the city he burned yet whose imperial grandeur he came to emulate, might have been seen as a fittingly symbolic resting place. Visualize not the bustling Mediterranean port of Alexandria, but the silent, wind-swept plains of central Iran. Imagine archaeologists scanning the ground near Pasargadae with radar, or carefully examining a forgotten underground chamber in the mountainside behind Persepolis. The so-called Alexander sarcophagus, discovered in Sidon with carvings of the king hunting and fighting Persians, shows how Greek and Persian artistic styles fused after his conquest, hinting at the cultural hybrid a true royal tomb might embody. The mystery endures because the answer would rewrite our understanding of Alexander's final identity. Was he the Greek conqueror laid to rest in a Hellenistic city, or was he, in the end, the last Achaemenid-style king of kings, returned to the stony landscape of his adopted realm? Every few years, a new claim emerges, but the desert and the ruins keep their secret. Perhaps his tomb, if it survives, waits not under the modern streets of Alexandria, but in the ancient Persian heartland, a final, profound testament to an empire that forever changed its destroyer. The conqueror's torch could not burn the water that truly sustained the empire. Far beneath the sun-baked plains and arid valleys, a hidden network of veins carried life itself, an engineering marvel known as the qanat. These were not simple wells, but gravity-fed underground aqueducts, masterfully designed tunnels that tapped into water trapped in the foothills of mountains and channeled it for miles across the desert to fields and cities. With a qanat, a barren landscape could bloom into a lush oasis, supporting agriculture, settlements, and ultimately, the vast imperial apparatus. The sheer scale of this hidden infrastructure is staggering. Some qanats ran for dozens of miles, maintaining a gentle, precise slope of perhaps 1 degree over their entire length to ensure a steady flow without erosion. This presents the central, quiet mystery. How did Achaemenid engineers without theodolites, laser levels, or even simple trigonometry achieve such breathtaking accuracy over such distances? The construction process was a feat of courage and collective knowledge. It began with locating a water source in an alluvial fan at the base of a mountain. From the desired endpoint in the plain, a master surveyor would plot a straight line back toward that source. Teams of specialized workers, known as qanats, would then begin the dangerous work, digging a series of vertical access shafts down to the water table, sometimes over 100 feet deep, and then connecting them with a horizontal tunnel at the bottom. The spoil from the tunneling was hauled up through these shafts, leaving signature lines of craters across the landscape that look from the air like a string of beads leading to the mountains. The precision required was immense. A slope too steep would cause violent water flow that would collapse the tunnel. A slope too shallow would allow the water to stagnate and silt up. The builders used simple but ingenious tools like water-filled troughs to check for level over short distances, and likely relied on generations of accumulated empirical knowledge passed down from father to son. This is where the mystery deepens. Were the qanats a Persian innovation, or did the Achaemenids perfect and systematize a technology learned from older civilizations like the Eurasians or even the Egyptians? The evidence suggests a brilliant synthesis. The Achaemenid state, with its resources and need to sustain its heartland, likely organized and funded these projects on an unprecedented scale, turning a local technique into an imperial policy. They understood that controlling water was the ultimate source of power. A qanat was a state secret and a strategic asset. Diagrams show their elegant cross-section, the underground channel protected from evaporation, with the regular access shafts allowing for maintenance and ventilation. Animations can illustrate the slow, deliberate march of construction, the teams working from both ends toward a meeting point deep in the earth, hoping their alignments matched. The success of the system was its simplicity and sustainability, using only gravity and careful geology. These silent, subterranean rivers were the true capillaries of the empire, more vital than any road. They transformed the Persian plateau into a breadbasket, enabling the concentration of wealth and manpower that built Persepolis and fielded the armies of the king. While we marvel at the palaces and the tombs, the greatest monument to Achaemenid genius may be the one you cannot see, the gentle murmur of water in the dark, bringing life to a desert for thousands of years. What other forgotten technologies lay buried, not in treasure chambers, but in the very soil that fed a civilization? High on the cliff face at Naksh-e-Rustam, the finished tombs of Darius the Great and his successors stand as perfect cross-shaped doorways into eternity. But travel to the rocky outcrop at Persepolis itself, and you will find a haunting exception. The tomb of Artaxerxes III is a ghost in stone, its facade only partially carved from the living rock. Where there should be a smooth, recessed panel with intricate reliefs of the king before a fire altar, supported by figures representing the nations of the empire, there is only a raw, jagged scar of unfinished limestone. The transition from polished artistry to rough, untreated rock is abrupt and startling. This visible interruption in the royal funerary ritual presents a silent but profound question: why was the eternal home of a king left incomplete? The most immediate answer seems to be time. Artaxerxes died in the year 338 BC, possibly from poison administered by his own court physician at the command of a rival eunuch. If his death was sudden and unexpected, the teams of skilled stone carvers who worked for years on such monuments may simply have been caught off guard. A royal tomb was not a project begun upon a king's death. It was a long-term construction started during his reign, a permanent preparation for the afterlife. Yet the political context suggests deeper currents. Artaxerxes' final years were a brutal consolidation of power, marked by the assassination of nearly his entire family to secure the succession for his sole surviving son, Arses. The empire was stable but simmering with court intrigue. Could the unfinished tomb reflect a subsequent power struggle or a period of instability immediately after his death, where resources and attention were diverted? Perhaps the craftsmen fled, or the new, young King Arses had different priorities. There is another, more speculative possibility. Could this tomb have been started for someone else entirely, a prince or a high noble, and then hastily repurposed for the king in a crisis, with workers abandoning the elaborate carvings to focus solely on cutting the burial chamber inside? The clues lie in the stone itself. The unfinished sections are a rare window into the construction process of these monumental facades. We can see the initial stages where the basic shape was pounded out of the cliff with heavy tools, leaving a pockmarked surface. Then finer chisels began to define the borders and outlines of the reliefs. In a finished tomb like that of Darius I, this would be followed by a final stage of meticulous smoothing and detailed sculpting. Here, the work stopped somewhere in the middle, visuals contrasting the smooth, deep-cut portal of Darius's tomb with the shallow, ragged opening of Artaxerxes's would highlight this stark difference. Close-up shots of the stonework could show the individual tool marks, the chisel grooves frozen in time, as if the workers put down their tools at the end of a day and never returned. This abandoned project speaks louder than a finished monument ever could. It tells us that even for a king, eternity was not guaranteed. It hints at the human labor behind the imperial grandeur and the fragile line between a dynasty's enduring legacy and its sudden, silent end. What urgent crisis, what whisper in the palace halls, was so compelling that it left a king's face forever uncarved in the rock? An unfinished tomb speaks of a dynasty's final, faltering steps, but another capital city vanished almost entirely from the earth. High in the cool mountains of western Iran lay Ecbatana, the fabled summer capital of the Medes and later the Achaemenid kings. Ancient Greek writers like Herodotus and Polybius described a city of breathtaking beauty, built on a hillside and encircled by 7 concentric walls, each painted a different dazzling color and crowned with battlements of gleaming metal. The innermost walls were said to be coated in silver and gold, shining like a crown against the green slopes. This was no mere fortress, it was a statement of cosmic order and imperial wealth, the place where kings would retreat from the scorching lowland heat to rule amidst splendor. Yet today, in the bustling modern city of Hamadan, almost nothing of the Achaemenid palace or those legendary walls remains to be seen. The great mystery is not if Ecbatana existed, but where its heart is buried. For an empire that left such profound marks at Persepolis and Susa, the near-total architectural silence at one of its chief capitals is deafening. How could a palace that hosted kings for centuries simply disappear? The most persistent theory is one of deep concealment. The modern city of Hamadan has been continuously inhabited for almost 3,000 years. Each successive civilization, from the Seleucids and Parthians to the Sassanids and the Islamic caliphates, built directly atop the ruins of its predecessors. The Achaemenid levels, therefore, are not just buried, they are entombed under dozens of feet of later urban debris, lying perhaps 30 or 40 meters below today's streets, shops, and houses. Excavation in such a dense, living city is a monumental challenge, more akin to delicate surgery than traditional archaeology. A second, more sobering possibility is total obliteration. The precious metals described on those walls would have been an irresistible target for later conquerors. Alexander's troops are recorded as looting an immense treasure from Ecbatana, and subsequent rulers likely stripped the site for building materials. The elegant ashlar blocks of the palace may have been quarried to build mosques or fortresses, leaving no trace of their original configuration. Ongoing archaeological efforts are a slow, meticulous puzzle. Teams have conducted core sampling, drilling narrow boreholes deep into the earth to extract soil and artifact fragments, trying to map the hidden stratigraphy. Ground-penetrating radar surveys attempt to locate large, man-made structures beneath public squares or older neighborhoods. Occasional finds, like a section of a column base or a fragment of a glazed brick relief discovered during sewer work, offer tantalizing proof that the palace is down there, waiting. But these are mere whispers from the deep. Visualizing Ecbatana requires a leap of faith. We can show artistic reconstructions based on ancient texts, animations of those magnificent colored walls rising tier by tier up the mountain. Contrast this with maps of modern Hamadan, a sprawling city of over 500,000 people, its ancient heart completely masked by the vibrant chaos of the present. Satellite imagery reveals the tell, the slight mound at the city's center that hints at the accumulated layers of history beneath. The discovery of the palace would be an epochal event. It would not just be a treasure trove of art, it would be a time capsule from the empire's operational nerve center during the summer months. We might find administrative archives on clay tablets, detailing the empire's daily business away from the formality of Persepolis. We could learn about court life, diplomacy, and the royal household in a different, more relaxed setting. It would complete our map of Achaemenid power, revealing how rule was exercised not from a single, fixed point, but from a rotating set of magnificent stages. For now, Ecbatana remains a ghost, its splendor preserved only in words and in the stubborn belief that somewhere under the feet of a busy merchant or a playing child, the echoes of silver and gold still sleep. The silent, half-carved tomb of Artaxerxes speaks of a dynasty interrupted, but another king left a declaration of faith that has sparked debate for centuries. At Persepolis, an inscription commissioned by Xerxes I, known as the Deva inscription, presents a theological puzzle carved in stone. In it, the king proclaims that in a certain unnamed country, there was a place where previously devas were worshipped. He states, by the favor of Ahura Mazda, I destroyed that sanctuary of the devas, and I made a proclamation, the devas shall not be worshipped. Where I destroyed the sanctuary of the devas, there I worshipped Ahura Mazda with the proper rite. This is a powerful statement of religious enforcement from a ruler often seen as a champion of imperial tolerance. So what exactly were the devas, and what sanctuary did Xerxes obliterate? The word itself is the crux of the mystery. In the older Zoroastrian scripture, the Avesta, devas are malevolent spirits, demons opposed to the divine order of Ahura Mazda. But in the wider ancient Iranian context, the term could also refer to the old gods of pre-Zoroastrian polytheistic religions, gods that the prophet Zoroaster rejected. So was Xerxes targeting a temple dedicated to actual demonic worship, or was he suppressing the indigenous deities of a rebellious province? The inscription gives no location, transforming the act into a ghost on the historical map. Scholars have proposed several tantalizing possibilities. One theory points to Babylon, where Xerxes had to quell a major rebellion early in his reign. Ancient sources claim he destroyed the great temple of Marduk, the patron god of the city. Could this be the Deva sanctuary, with Marduk recast as a false god in Persian imperial propaganda? This would frame the inscription not as general piety, but as a specific political act following a revolt, a way to justify the desecration of a foreign cult center by labeling it evil. Another idea suggests a location within the heartland of the empire itself. Perhaps there was a sect or a region that practiced a form of Zoroastrianism deemed heretical, worshipping the wrong divine entities, and the king moved to purify the state religion. A third, more nuanced interpretation sees it as largely metaphorical. The inscription may not commemorate a single physical destruction, but rather proclaims the king's overarching mission to spread the correct worship of Ahura Mazda across his domains, using the story of a destroyed temple as a symbolic narrative of his divine duty. Visuals would show the cuneiform text of the inscription itself, the precise wedge-shaped marks declaring the king's deed. We might see depictions of a Zoroastrian fire altar, the sacred flame representing the pure worship Xerxes championed, contrasted with imagined representations of the mysterious Deva cult, perhaps shadowy idols or unfamiliar rituals. A map could highlight the empire's staggering religious diversity, from the Jewish communities in Babylon and Jerusalem to the temples of Greek gods in Ionia and the sun cults of Egypt, all under the Persian king's rule. This diversity makes the Deva inscription so intriguing. It clashes with the famous image of Achaemenid tolerance, best exemplified by the Cyrus Cylinder. Was Xerxes reversing his grandfather's policy, or was tolerance always a pragmatic tool, one that could be set aside when facing rebellion or religious challenge? The inscription may represent the exception that proves the rule, a rare moment of religious coercion recorded precisely because it was extraordinary. The true mystery is not just about a lost temple, but about the limits of imperial ideology. How far could the King of Kings accommodate the gods of others before he felt compelled to assert the supremacy of his own? Xerxes left the answer carved in stone but forgot to tell us where to look. The king's decree needed more than couriers to reach the farthest corners of his realm. It needed eyes to see if it was obeyed. In the shadows of the satrap's palace and the bustle of the distant marketplace moved the most feared agents of the crown, known to the Greeks as the king's eye, or sometimes the king's ears. Their title alone evokes a chilling image, the invisible, all-seeing gaze of the emperor himself piercing through any veil of deception. But who were these watchers? The historical record offers whispers and implications, but no roster of names, no detailed manual of operations, leaving their true nature as one of the empire's most effective and enigmatic secrets. Greek sources like Herodotus and Xenophon describe them as royal inspectors, traveling without warning to any province. They held the authority to audit accounts, review troop musters, and investigate complaints of corruption or disloyalty against the local governor, the satrap. Their power derived from one fact alone: they reported directly and only to the King of Kings. In an empire where communication took weeks, they were the sovereign's personal instrument for maintaining control, a human antidote to the vast distances that could breed rebellion. The central mystery lies in their organization. Was the king's eye a formal, standing office with a dedicated corps of agents trained and salaried by the state? Or was it a more fluid, informal network where trusted nobles, military officers, or even merchants were given specific investigative missions on an ad hoc basis? The Persian sources themselves are mute on the specifics. We have no lists of inspectors, no tablets detailing their expenses or ranks. This silence is strategic. The power of the eye depended on its unpredictability and its anonymity. If you could not know who the agent was, then anyone you met could be one. Visualize the grand reliefs at Persepolis, the endless procession of tribute bearers approaching the throne. Imagine the scene not just as ceremony but as inspection. A figure standing just outside the carved frame, dressed like any other noble, observing who shows respect, who seems reluctant, who whispers to his neighbor. This shadow in the stone is the essence of the mystery. Their methods were likely as varied as their identities. They could arrive with a full military escort, making a public spectacle of their order to reinforce imperial authority. Or they could travel in disguise, mingling with soldiers in barracks or farmers in fields, listening for grumblings about taxes or murmurs of dissent, becoming the literal ears of the king. The Greek fascination with them often tipped into paranoia, painting them as an omnipresent secret police, a tool of despotism. Yet, from the Persian perspective, they were a necessary check on the immense power delegated to the satraps, a way to ensure justice and efficiency, and to collect the royal taxes that fueled the empire. In many ways, they prefigured later intelligence networks, from the Roman fragmentarii to the Ottoman mutaferica, and even the concept of imperial inspectors in dynastic China. Their true legacy is the climate of accountability they created, real or perceived. The fear of the unexpected visit, the unannounced auditor, kept local officials in line more effectively than any written law. So the unanswered questions only amplify their ghostly presence. How many were there? How were they chosen for their loyalty? Did they have a secret seal or token to prove their identity to a satrap? We may never know. The most successful spies in history leave no records, only the lingering suspicion that someone, somewhere, is always watching. This system of invisible oversight held a sprawling empire together, proving that sometimes the most powerful force is not an army in the field, but a single, unseen pair of eyes believed to be everywhere at once. Centuries after the Achaemenid Empire fell, Persian kings were still carving their stories into the living rock. In the lush hills of western Iran, near the modern city of Kermanshah, stand the magnificent Tak-e-Bostan reliefs. They are a masterpiece of the later Sasanian Empire, carved into the walls of a grotto and on grand arched facades between the 4th and 7th centuries AD. The kings depicted here, Shapur II and Khosrow II, ruled long after Persepolis lay in ruins, yet the ghost of the First Persian Empire seems to whisper from the stone. The central artistic mystery is one of inheritance. How much of this powerful royal imagery is a direct continuation of Achaemenid tradition? The scenes are undeniably Sasanian. We see dramatic investiture ceremonies where the ruler receives the ring of power from the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda or the goddess Anahita. There are vast, energetic royal hunts in enclosed parks with elephants and boars. The king's armor is detailed, a suit of intricate plates and chainmail, but look closer and the echoes begin. The very concept of carving monumental royal propaganda into a mountainside is profoundly Achaemenid. The Behistun inscription of Darius the Great set the precedent, a king's narrative made permanent in the landscape. The composition at Tak-e-Bostan, while more fluid and three-dimensional, still centers the king as a colossal, dominant figure, just as the Achaemenid reliefs did. The theme of divine endorsement is identical, only the form of the deity has changed. Even the hunting scenes, a display of royal prowess and control over nature, find a precursor in the lion hunting motifs on Achaemenid seals and smaller artifacts. The proposed side-by-side visuals would be telling. Place the serene, formal procession of tribute bearers from the Apadana stairway at Persepolis next to the dynamic, almost chaotic energy of the Tak-e-Bostan boar hunt. The styles differ, one is static and symbolic, the other is narrative and lively. Yet the core message is the same: the king is the axis of the world, a figure of unmatched power and prosperity. Compare the winged disc of Ahura Mazda at Behistun with the detailed figure of the same god at Tak-e-Bostan, both bestowing legitimacy upon the mortal ruler. The armor is a fascinating puzzle. The Sasanian kings wear recognizably late Roman-style plate armor, a product of their wars with Byzantium. But the idea of depicting the monarch in his full military regalia as the ultimate warrior taps into an ancient Persian ideal of kingship that the Achaemenids certainly embodied, even if they showed it differently. So, is this a case of direct artistic borrowing or a deeper cultural resonance? The Sasanians saw themselves as the restorers of the Persian Empire after the Hellenistic and Parthian interlude. They consciously reached back past those periods to claim the legacy of Cyrus and Darius. Their art was not a copy, but a revival and an evolution. They took the Achaemenid template of rock-cut royal proclamation and infused it with a new dynamism, a different artistic vocabulary learned from centuries of interaction with Rome and the wider world. The mystery of tacky Boston, then, is not about tracing exact lines, but about feeling a persistent pulse. It asks how long the shadow of an empire truly is. Can a political entity vanish while its core ideas of kingship, divinity, and permanence continue to shape stone 1,000 years later? The reliefs suggest that the Achaemenids did more than build an empire. They forged an enduring language of power, one that later kings felt compelled to speak, even as they added their own dialect. While kings carved their power in stone, their most valued servants worked to preserve the fragile vessel of the human body. The Achaemenid court was a crossroads of medical wisdom, a place where royal physicians from Egypt, Greece, and India exchanged knowledge under the patronage of the King of Kings. Historical accounts, like those of the Greek doctor Ctesias who served at the court of Artaxerxes II, describe a sophisticated medical system. The empire even maintained special facilities referred to as bimeristan, houses for the sick, which functioned as early hospitals for soldiers and perhaps even the public. They utilized complex herbal pharmacopoeias, drawing on the flora of a continent, and practiced surgery with precision tools. Yet here lies a profound cultural loss. What exactly was written in the medical scrolls and tablets of the Achaemenids themselves? The primary repository for this knowledge would have been the royal archives of Persepolis, thousands of clay tablets and parchment scrolls stored in the palace complex. When Alexander's troops set the great halls ablaze, they did not just burn cedar and gold, they incinerated a library. The heat of that fire would have baked the clay administrative tablets, ironically preserving some, but it would have utterly consumed any organic materials like papyrus or leather scrolls containing medical treatises. This was a knowledge apocalypse. The mystery, therefore, is one of reconstruction. What theories did these doctors hold about anatomy, disease, and treatment? We have fleeting clues. The Persians were noted for their emphasis on cleanliness, a concept aligned with Zoroastrian purity laws which would have aided in infection control. They were expert herbalists, and later Persian medical texts, written in the Islamic Golden Age by scholars like al-Razi and Ibn Sina, contain references to remedies and plants native to the Iranian plateau that likely have roots in much older oral traditions passed down from Achaemenid times. A compelling question arises: could this lost knowledge have influenced the very foundation of Western medicine? The father of medicine himself, the Greek Hippocrates, lived and taught during the height of the Achaemenid Empire, when cultural exchange across the Aegean was constant. Is it possible that some Persian concepts about diagnosis, prognosis, or herbal medicine filtered into the Hippocratic corpus? We may never have direct proof, but the historical context makes it a tantalizing possibility. To visualize this lost world, we might see artistic reconstructions of a royal examination, a physician feeling a pulse or preparing a poultice under the arched ceilings of a palace chamber. Archaeological finds from the region, like bronze scalpels, probes, and bone saws from later periods, give us an idea of the tools they might have used. Most evocative are the pages from later, magnificent Persian medical manuscripts, such as a copy of the Canon of Medicine. Their intricate illustrations of plants and anatomical charts representing a tradition that may have begun 1,000 years earlier in the ashes of Persepolis. The true content of those original scrolls is a ghost in the history of science, a reminder that the greatest casualty of a library's burning is not the parchment, but the future it might have informed. What cures, what understandings of the human condition were lost in that single, fateful conflagration? the silent halls of the royal physicians were not the only place where life and death were decided. Within the very heart of the empire, a different kind of story unfolded, one of beauty, courage, and a plot to annihilate an entire people. The Book of Esther, a foundational text of the Jewish faith, is set squarely in the Achaemenid court of King Ahasuerus, a figure many scholars identify as Xerxes I. Its plot is a dramatic thriller. Ahasuerus, after deposing his queen, chooses the beautiful Jewish orphan Esther as his new bride, unaware of her heritage. Her cousin and guardian, Mordecai, uncovers a plot against the king's life, earning royal favor. But the king's grand vizier, the vengeful Haman, enraged by Mordecai's refusal to bow, convinces the king to issue a decree for the extermination of all Jews in the empire on a specific fateful day. Esther, revealing her identity at great personal risk, foils the plot. Haman is hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai, and the Jews are granted the right to defend themselves. The victory is commemorated by the joyous festival of Purim, celebrated to this day. The central historical mystery is piercing. Does this vivid tale contain a kernel of truth from the Persian court, or is it purely a powerful work of religious fiction? On one hand, the story is riddled with historical challenges. No extra-biblical source records a queen of Xerxes named Esther, whose Hebrew name was Hadassah, or a vizier named Haman. The Persian kings typically married only from a handful of noble Persian families, making a Jewish queen consort highly improbable. The notion of an irrevocable royal decree, a key plot point, does align with a known Persian concept of law, as noted by the Greek historian Herodotus. Yet the idea of a genocidal edict issued against a specific ethnic group across the entire empire seems at odds with the general Achaemenid policy of tolerance and local autonomy, best exemplified by the Cyrus Cylinder. So where might the echoes of reality be found? Many historians see the story not as a literal record, but as a diaspora tale crafted centuries later, reflecting the perennial anxieties and hopes of a minority community living under foreign power. The characters could be archetypes. Haman, described as an Agagite, might symbolize historic enemies of the Jewish people. The setting, however, is painted with remarkably authentic color. The book meticulously describes the opulence of the palace at Susa, the complex, multi-layered bureaucracy, the importance of royal banquets, and the elaborate protocol of approaching the king, all of which resonate with what we know of Achaemenid court life from archaeology and Greek accounts. The plot itself hinges on the kind of palace intrigue and sudden reversals of fortune that were commonplace in any ancient court. A forgotten act of loyalty, like Mordecai's, being recorded in the royal chronicles and later rewarded, feels like a plausible bureaucratic detail. Visuals can bring this duality to life. Show the excavated foundation of the great Apadana at Susa, the very hall where Ahasuerus might have held his feast. Display reconstructions of Persian court dress, the flowing robes and intricate jewelry Esther might have worn. Contrast these with vibrant illustrations from centuries of illuminated Esther scrolls, where the story lives in the realm of faith and symbol. The festival of Purim itself is a historical artifact of sorts, its very existence proof of the story's profound impact. Whether it commemorates a specific, hidden event or a collective salvation from 1,000 smaller threats, its enduring joy is undeniable. The mystery of Esther, therefore, is not one of verifying names and dates, but of listening for the whispers of real experience within a timeless narrative. It asks us to consider how history is remembered not just in archives, but in the stories communities tell to define themselves against the backdrop of empire. Did a real crisis under Xerxes inspire this tale of deliverance, its specifics lost but its emotional truth preserved? The answer may lie not in the clay tablets of Persepolis, but in the enduring laughter and celebration of a festival that refuses to let the story end. The story of Esther is one of survival, but another tale from the empire's edge is one of sudden abandonment. In the late 19th century, along the banks of the ancient Oxus River in modern-day Tajikistan, a group of merchants stumbled upon a find that would rewrite our understanding of Achaemenid artistry, a hoard of gold so magnificent it defied belief. This was the Oxus treasure, a collection of around 180 exquisite objects, from delicate model chariots and intricate bracelets to statuettes of bearded priests and engraved finger rings. Each piece is a masterpiece of delicate granulation and fine metalwork, a testament to the empire's staggering wealth and aesthetic refinement. Yet from the moment it emerged from the mud, the treasure posed a single, haunting question: whose hands last held this gold, and what desperate event forced them to let it go? The treasure is an eclectic puzzle in itself. It is not a uniform set of royal regalia, but a diverse assortment that suggests several possible origins. There are magnificent gold armlets terminating in mythical griffins, fit for a king or a high noble. There are small, solid gold model chariots pulled by 4 horses, which may have been votive offerings to a temple. There are numerous personal signet rings and plaques depicting Persian nobles or Mesopotamian heroes, items of daily use and devotion. This mix points to a communal or institutional collection rather than a single person's wealth. So, was this the sacred treasury of a remote Zoroastrian fire temple, buried to save it from an advancing army? Could it have been a royal gift, a shipment of tribute or diplomatic presents being transported along that vital river route, intercepted and hidden by bandits who were themselves later killed? Or perhaps it was the carefully hidden loot from a successful robbery, stashed away with the intention of a return that never came. The drama of its modern discovery only deepens the enigma. The story goes that local merchants found the treasure, sold parts of it, and were then captured by a regional chieftain. A British officer, Captain Francis Burton, reportedly intervened to secure their release, and the remaining artifacts made their way to the British Museum in a series of clandestine deals. The precise find spot was never properly recorded, and the original context, the soil layer, the container, any accompanying remains, was lost forever. This means we can only guess at its burial date, though the style of the objects firmly places it in the 5th or 4th centuries BC. Visuals of the treasure are essential to feel its power. Imagine a model chariot no bigger than your hand, with spoked wheels that actually turn, pulled by 4 finely sculpted horses. Picture a gold armlet, its ends shaped into the powerful bodies of winged griffins, their feathers rendered in microscopic detail. These were not mere symbols of wealth, they were expressions of a cosmopolitan worldview, blending Persian, Mesopotamian, and even Greek artistic influences, proof of the cultural exchange that flowed along the empire's trade routes. The treasure is a ghost of a moment in time, a collection frozen in the act of being hidden. It tells us of the reach of Persian luxury into its farthest provinces, and of the constant peril that attended such wealth, whether from invasion, rebellion, or simple crime. The gold remains dazzling and silent, but the story of its final owner has vanished as completely as if the Oxus River itself had washed it away. What crisis, seen from a temple door or a riverbank, was so imminent that the only choice was to consign a fortune to the earth? Gold hidden in the earth speaks of wealth, but control of the sea demanded an empire of a different kind. The Achaemenid dominion stretched to the shores of 3 continents, and its true power was projected by a vast multinational armada. For centuries, our understanding of ancient naval warfare has been filtered through a Greek lens, celebrating the trireme and the democratic spirit of Athens. This perspective obscures a fundamental mystery: just how formidable was the navy of the King of Kings? The Persian fleet was not a single, homogeneous force, but a coalition of the ancient world's greatest seafaring peoples. Phoenician mariners from cities like Sidon and Tyre, masters of the Mediterranean, formed its experienced core. They were joined by skilled Egyptian sailors, Cypriot captains, and eventually reluctant Ionian Greeks from the empire's western coast. This diversity was both a strength and a puzzle. How did Persian admirals coordinate such a polyglot force with different languages, traditions, and ship designs into a single weapon? The logistical challenge is staggering. For the invasions of Greece under Darius and Xerxes, ancient sources like Herodotus give us almost unbelievable numbers. He claims Xerxes assembled over 1,200 triremes for the campaign of 480 BC. While this figure is likely exaggerated for epic effect, it points to a reality of immense organized naval power. These ships required colossal support, thousands of oarsmen, months of provisions, and secure harbors all along the coast of Asia Minor. The mystery deepens because we have almost no detailed Persian records of their naval doctrine, their shipyard organization, or their battle tactics. Everything we know comes from their Greek adversaries, who had every reason to magnify the threat they heroically overcame. So what did this fleet look like? Reconstructions rely on Greek pottery, rare Assyrian reliefs, and later Phoenician coins. The primary warship was undoubtedly the trireme, a sleek, fast vessel powered by 170 oarsmen arranged in 3 tiers. But it is likely the Phoenician triremes in Persian service were subtly different from the Athenian ones, perhaps with a higher prow or a more enclosed deck for marines. Visuals can show these differences, side-by-side models of a Greek and a Phoenician trireme, highlighting variations that might have offered tactical advantages. The battles themselves are case studies in this mystery. At Lade in 494 BC, the Ionian Greek rebels assembled a sizable fleet to challenge Persian control. The Persian commanders, however, expertly exploited political divisions among the Greeks, leading to mass defections and a decisive victory that crushed the revolt. This was a win achieved as much by diplomacy and subversion as by ramming prows, revealing a nuanced understanding of naval warfare that extended beyond the clash of hulls. A decade later at Salamis, the story is more complex. The Greek victory is legendary, but it was born from Persian overextension and the perfect use of a narrow strait. The massive Persian fleet, cramped and unable to maneuver, became its own worst enemy. Yet even in defeat, the scale of their effort is breathtaking. To visualize Salamis, animated maps can show the hundreds of ship icons funneling into the strait, the chaos as the leading ships turned back into their own advancing lines. It was less a defeat of an inferior navy and more the catastrophic failure of a gigantic, cumbersome force in the wrong environment. Perhaps the most telling clue to Persian naval philosophy isn't found in battle, but in a relief at Persepolis. On the grand stairway, among the procession of tribute-bearers, we see delegates from the empire's territories. Some are carrying a gift that is not gold or fabric, but a model of a warship. This was not a toy, it was a symbolic offering of their naval power to the great king. The empire did not necessarily build a monolithic Persian navy, it commanded the seas by commanding the sailors of the coast. The true strength of the Achaemenid fleet lay in this system of integration, drawing on centuries of maritime knowledge from subject nations and directing it toward imperial goals. So the unanswered questions are profound. Did they have dedicated naval architects experimenting with hull designs? What signals did admirals use to coordinate maneuvers between squadrons speaking different languages? The sea, like the desert, keeps its secrets. The silence of the Persian records means we hear only one side of the story, the triumphant shouts of the victors at Salamis. But the very scale of their fear tells us they were not shouting at a phantom, but at a leviathan that, for a moment, truly ruled the waves. The might of a fleet was recorded on wax and wood, but the true memory of the empire was etched into clay. Amidst the scorched ruins of Persepolis, archaeologists made an astonishing discovery, not of gold but of bureaucracy. Tens of thousands of small, inscribed clay tablets were found, known as the Persepolis Fortification and Treasury Archives. They are a miracle of preservation, baked hard by the very fire that destroyed the palace. These tablets offer an intimate ledger of the empire's daily heartbeat, detailing the issuance of flour and wine to workers, the travel rations for dignitaries, and the careful accounting of temple offerings. We can see the hand of the scribe, the seal of the official, the mundane rhythm of a superpower's pantry. Yet this incredible find presents a paradox that haunts historians. Where is everything else? These tablets are the empire's grocery lists and travel vouchers. But where are the royal decrees, the diplomatic correspondence with Athens or Sparta, the battlefield reports from the edges of the realm, the private letters between satraps and the king? This is the profound silence within the noise, the missing archives of high statecraft. The administrative minutiae survived in fire, but the grand narrative of policy and command seems to have vanished. The leading theory points to a simple material truth. The highest-level communications, the documents meant for the king's eyes and for history, were likely not written on humble, bulky clay. They were probably inscribed on perishable materials, on fine parchment, leather scrolls, or even papyrus. These materials were lighter, faster to write on, and easier to transport across vast distances, perfect for an empire connected by royal roads. But they are also tragically vulnerable. When Alexander's torches ignited the palace, these organic archives would have been the first to vanish in a puff of smoke, leaving no trace behind. Imagine the scene in a royal chancery. Visualize rows of scribes, some hunched over damp clay tablets for local records, their style pressing the routine. Others, perhaps in a different room, are carefully brushing ink onto smooth sheets of prepared leather, drafting a message to a general on the Nile or a governor in Sardis. The clay was for the empire's body, the parchment for its mind and voice. This creates a ghost library in our historical understanding. We know the price of a sheep in Persepolis, but we do not know the content of the negotiations that kept the peace with Greece for decades. We know the rations for a caravan from India, but not the strategic orders that mobilized the immortals. The absence of these high-level records means we view the Achaemenid Empire through a keyhole, seeing the machinery of daily life with crystal clarity, while the deliberations in the throne room remain a muffled conversation behind a heavy curtain. Could some of these lost archives still exist? It is a tantalizing possibility. If copies were sent to provincial capitals like Babylon or Ecbatana, and if they were stored in a way that avoided fire, they could, in theory, survive. Perhaps a sealed clay jar, forgotten in a subterranean storeroom beneath the modern streets of Hamadan, holds the leather scrolls that contain the empire's secret history. Until such a discovery, the thousands of small tablets stand as both a gift and a reminder, a detailed map of the empire's footprint from which the figure walking has mysteriously stepped away. The daily ledgers of the empire were grounded in earth, but its founder's final monument may have been aligned with the heavens. At the wind-swept site of Pasargadae, the simple, gabled tomb of Cyrus the Great stands in solemn isolation. Its clean lines and stepped platforms speak of a deliberate, powerful aesthetic, but look beyond the stone itself to its placement within the landscape, and a more subtle mystery emerges. Some researchers propose that the entire capitol complex, from the tomb's entrance to the orientation of palace platforms, was carefully arranged according to celestial events. This raises a profound question. Did Cyrus and his architects design his capital not just as a seat of earthly power, but as a mirror of cosmic order? The evidence is written in angles of light. Certain studies suggest that the long axis of Cyrus's tomb, the direction its small doorway faces, aligns with the rising sun on the equinoxes, those 2 days of perfect balance in spring and autumn. If true, the first light of those mornings would penetrate directly into the chamber, symbolically bathing the king's resting place in solar rebirth. Other theories point to the solstices, or even to specific stars sacred to Persian cosmology, like Sirius or Vega, which might have been framed by the tomb's entrance at key moments in the year. The palaces and gardens of Pasargadae, laid out across a wide plain, also show intriguing geometric relationships with each other and with distant mountain peaks, patterns that could be ceremonial or astronomical. Visuals can bring this hypothesis to life. Imagine a time-lapse sequence filmed from within the tomb's doorway, the sun's disk rising perfectly along the central axis on a crisp March morning. Aerial drone footage could trace lines across the site, connecting the tomb, the audience hall, and the remains of the gatehouse with the distant horizon where certain stars would have appeared. Animated star charts can overlay the ancient sky, showing how constellations would have shifted over the centuries, perhaps aligning with the site's layout at the time of its construction. Yet the mystery is far from solved. Critics argue that such alignments could be coincidental, the result of practical considerations like prevailing winds, the course of a nearby river, or simply an aesthetic preference for a pleasing vista. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or Stonehenge, the astronomical evidence at Pasargadae is subtle, lacking the overt, massive stone markers that clearly track celestial cycles. Furthermore, we have no written Achaemenid text that mentions an intentional celestial design for the city. So, was this a unique statement by Cyrus or part of a broader practice? Later Achaemenid sites like Persepolis and Naksh-e-Rustam show a primary concern with solar symbolism, with reliefs depicting the king under the winged disk of Ahura Mazda, a deity associated with the sun and sky. The alignment of royal tombs to face the rising sun does seem to be a recurring theme, suggesting a deep cultural link between kingship and the celestial realm. Perhaps Pasargadae represents the purest, most personal expression of this belief, designed by a founder king to eternally connect his legacy to the fundamental rhythms of the universe. The true answer lies in the silent dialogue between the stones and the sky. Every equinox sunrise that touches the tomb's threshold is a test of the theory, a moment where geometry and light either confirm a grand design or highlight our own desire to find patterns in the past. Was Cyrus, the great unifier of peoples, also seeking to unify his realm with the cosmos, anchoring his empire not just in law, but in the very movement of the stars? The plain at Pasargadae holds its peace, offering only the wind and the long, precise shadows of a timeless monument. The silent alignment of Cyrus's tomb gives way to a stone symphony of empire, carved into the very stairs that led to the throne. At Persepolis, the grand staircases of the Apadana, or audience hall, are lined with a frozen procession. 23 delegations, each a snapshot of a different nation, climb eternally toward the king. They carry gifts: a lion from Babylon, a two-humped Bactrian camel, delicate Greek vases, and bolts of fine cloth. This is the empire in miniature, a stone census of its staggering diversity. But is this a documentary record of a real event or something more carefully crafted? The central mystery lies in the gap between stone and reality. Was there truly an annual New Year's festival, the Nowruz, where ambassadors from every corner of the realm paraded through these gates with tribute, a living version of this relief? Or is this pure ideology, a perfect, unchanging vision of submission carved for gods and future generations to witness? The truth likely blends both. Such ceremonies almost certainly occurred, reinforcing loyalty and displaying the king's reach. But the reliefs are not a spontaneous snapshot, they are a permanent, edited masterpiece. Notice the order, the harmony. There is no chaos, no resistance. Every delegate moves with serene purpose, each group led by a dignified Persian usher. This is the empire as it wished to be seen, unified, peaceful, and eternally reverent. The puzzle deepens when we try to name every face. While many delegations are identifiable by their distinctive gifts and clothing, some remain ambiguous. Who are the figures wearing pointed caps and bringing a chariot? Are they Armenians or people from a more distant steppe? The delegation presenting a humpless cow has been linked to both the Indus Valley and parts of Arabia. Scholars debate these identities, piecing together clues from the carvings themselves and scattered references in other texts. Each uncertain figure is a lost name, a people whose story in the empire is told only by their stone silhouette and the offering in their hands. The gifts themselves are a catalogue of imperial economics. They are not random treasures, but symbolic of each land's unique wealth and role. The Ethiopians bring an elephant tusk, a product of their distant forests. The Ionians offer finely woven cloth and ornate vessels, speaking of artistic skill. The Sogdians lead a horse, the premier export of the Central Asian plains. The Lydians bear bracelets and coins, reflecting their legendary metalworking and early use of currency. This was not just tribute, it was a map of resources, a stone ledger showing how the empire functioned as a vast, interconnected economic engine. Visuals bring this frozen pageant to life. Imagine a slow camera pan across the reliefs, highlighting the exquisite details, the curl of a lion's mane, the intricate pattern on a saddle blanket, the delicate folds of a linen tunic. We can see the distinct hairstyles, the beards, the headgear, from the simple caps of the Scythians to the elaborate turbans of the Babylonians. Side-by-side comparisons can show the delegation from India with their donkeys and baskets, contrasted with the armored Medes presenting precious vessels. These are not caricatures but individualized portraits, suggesting the artists worked from real models, perhaps ambassadors who actually visited the court. This careful, respectful depiction is part of the mystery's power. If it was mere propaganda, why such attention to authentic detail? Perhaps because the most effective message of control is not erasure but incorporation. The empire proclaimed its strength not by making everyone the same, but by showing it could hold all this magnificent difference in one hand, all walking peacefully up the same stair toward the same king. So were the Apadana reliefs a lie? Not exactly. They were an ideal, a promise of order. They show the empire not as it always was, with its rebellions and administrative headaches, but as it aspired to be, a world where every nation knew its place and brought its finest gifts to the center of the world. In that silent stone procession, we hear the whispered ambition of an ancient superpower to make a moment of perfect harmony last for eternity. The serene stone procession at Persepolis ends at a throne where power was absolute but safety was an illusion. The death of King Xerxes I, the monarch who invaded Greece and raised Persepolis to its zenith, was a shocking and intimate crime. In the year 465 BC, within the very walls meant to protect him, the King of Kings was murdered in his own bedchamber. The assassin, according to the ancient sources, was Artabanus, the commander of the royal bodyguard, a man entrusted with the king's life. He did not strike from a distance with a rebel army, but in the quiet of the night with a dagger in the royal quarters. This was not a foreign conquest, but a betrayal from the heart of the palace itself. The immediate facts are brutal and clear, yet they open a labyrinth of motive that historians have navigated for centuries. Was this the act of a single, ambitious courtier, or the opening move in a dynastic coup orchestrated by the king's own son? The sources we rely on, primarily the Greek historians Ctesias and Diodorus, offer conflicting scripts for the same bloody scene. In one version, Artabanus acts alone, driven by a personal desire for power. He murders Xerxes, then tries to pin the blame on the king's eldest son, Darius, only to be exposed and killed by the younger son, Artaxerxes, who then rightfully takes the throne. This is a straightforward tale of villainy and heroic succession, but another, more layered account suggests Artabanus was not working alone. In this telling, he was in league with a powerful eunuch of the court, and crucially with Prince Artaxerxes himself. The murder is framed as the first step in a pre-arranged plan to clear the path to the throne, eliminating both Xerxes and the crown Prince Darius in one fell swoop. The plot thickens with the reported involvement of the royal Hazarapat, the commander of 1,000, suggesting a conspiracy that reached deep into the military elite. Visuals can capture this tense duality. Imagine a dramatic reconstruction of the shadowy palace corridors at night, a lone figure, Artabanus, slipping past guards who recognize him, his face a mask of resolve or treachery. Contrast this with a scene of whispered conversations between the prince and the courtier, plotting in a secluded garden, their faces illuminated by a single oil lamp. We can see artifacts like the distinctive seals of Artaxerxes I, the new king who emerged from the chaos, his royal imagery a statement of restored order after a profound rupture. The implications of this night ripple far beyond a single death. It exposes the fundamental vulnerability of the Achaemenid king. His power was cosmic in scale, yet his person was protected only by the loyalty of the men who stood outside his door. The royal bodyguard, the very institution designed as an impenetrable shield, became the weapon. This event likely triggered sweeping changes in palace security protocols, perhaps increasing the role of eunuchs who, with no families to threaten, were considered more reliably loyal, or creating more checks within the guard itself. The succession mystery is equally compelling. If Artaxerxes was complicit, his subsequent long and stable reign represents one of history's most successful usurpations, his involvement scrubbed from the official record. If he was the avenging hero, then his rule was built on a foundation of filial piety and justice. The truth shapes our view of his entire kingship. His famous inscription at Persepolis, detailing the construction of his hall, makes no mention of his father's violent end, only a smooth transition of divine favor. The palace walls, covered in reliefs of peaceful tribute, now also whisper of a hidden, bloody night where the line between guardian and killer, between son and usurper, was irrevocably blurred. In the end, the murder of Xerxes forces us to ask where true power resides, in the grand symbols of empire carved in stone, or in the trust of the man who holds your chamber door. Above the king on every relief, a silent witness hovers in the sky. The winged disk known today as the Faravaha is the most instantly recognizable symbol of ancient Persia. A regal figure emerges from a ring, his hand raised in blessing or authority, his lower body trailing into elegant feathers that spread like a hawk's wings. We see it at Behistun, at Persepolis, at Naksh-e-Rustam, a celestial seal of approval hovering directly over the monarch. But for all its prominence, the Achaemenids left no manual, no inscription that explicitly says, "This is what this means." The symbol's precise meaning is a beautiful, unresolved puzzle. Was it a depiction of the supreme god, Ahura Mazda himself, or was it something more abstract, like the king's divine right to rule, a concept known as Khvarina, or royal glory? Perhaps it represented a Fravashi, a personal guardian spirit believed to guide each individual, here acting as the eternal protector of the king and the state. The evidence is in the details, and they tell a shifting story. On the earliest Achaemenid monuments, like the Behistun inscription of Darius, the figure within the disk is just that, a simple, stylized human form. But later, under kings like Xerxes and Artaxerxes, the carving becomes more elaborate. The figure wears a Persian crown and holds a ring, a symbol of sovereignty, in one hand. This evolution suggests the symbol's meaning was not static. It may have become more explicitly linked to the divine endorsement of the monarchy over time. To trace its origins, we must look back before Persia. The visual motif of a winged disk has deep roots in the ancient Near East. In Assyrian art, we see the disk of the sun god Shamash, often with wings but without a human figure. The Egyptians had the winged sun disk of Horus, representing protection and royalty. The Achaemenid artists were not creating in a vacuum. They were master synthesizers, taking a powerful visual language from their imperial predecessors and infusing it with their own unique theological and political ideas. They transformed a general symbol of celestial power into a specific emblem of their own world order. Visual comparisons are essential. Side by side, we can see the stark Assyrian version, a plain disk with feathered wings, often flanking a king. Then the Achaemenid innovation, the introduction of the dignified human torso, dressed in Persian robes, making the divine connection personal and immediate. The modern journey of this symbol adds another layer to its mystery. Today, the Faravaha is embraced widely as a symbol of Zoroastrian faith and Iranian cultural heritage. Yet this modern adoption, while deeply felt, projects a unified religious meaning onto an ancient symbol that might have carried multiple overlapping meanings for the people who carved it. For the Achaemenid stonemason high on a scaffold smoothing the limestone, was he carving God, glory, or guardian? The stone does not say. It simply presents the image, forever hovering between heaven and earth, between the king and the divine, inviting every generation to find its own answer in the graceful curve of a wing. The winged symbol of divine favor could not protect the last man to hold the title of King of Kings. Darius III inherited an empire already straining under the weight of its own history, and his reign became a desperate, running battle against the unstoppable force of Alexander of Macedon. After catastrophic defeats at Issus and Gaugamela, Darius fled eastward, a king without a kingdom, his authority crumbling with every mile. The final betrayal came not from a foreign enemy, but from within his own circle. Beset by exhaustion and despair in the deserts of Bactria, Darius was seized by his most trusted subordinate, the satrap Bessus, who declared himself the new ruler and left the bound king in a wagon to be found by Alexander's pursuing cavalry. By the time Alexander reached him, Darius was dying, struck down by his captors. The conqueror, in a moment of solemn respect, covered the fallen king with his own cloak. He then ordered a full royal funeral with all the honors due to a monarch, and with that ceremony, Darius III, the last Achaemenid, vanished from the historical record. The enduring mystery is not how he died, but where his body was laid to rest. Alexander's gesture was politically brilliant, casting himself as the legitimate successor who honored his predecessor. But it leaves a haunting geographical void. Was Darius interred in a traditional Persian royal tomb, perhaps in the sacred necropolis at Naksh-e-Rustam alongside Darius the Great and Xerxes? Or was his burial arranged in the haste of a military campaign, a more modest affair, a simple grave in the stark landscape of what is now northern Iran or Afghanistan, marked only by a cairn of stones that has long since been scattered? The visual record of his life is poignant. The famous Alexander mosaic from Pompeii, likely based on a much earlier painting, captures the moment of his defeat at Issus. We see Darius on his chariot, his face a mask of shock and desperation as he reaches toward a dying Persian soldier, while Alexander charges toward him. This is the king in flight, a far cry from the serene, eternal monarchs carved on the cliffs. To imagine his tomb, we must contrast this chaos with the silent, orderly grandeur of the existing Achaemenid tombs, their cross-shaped facades staring out across the plain. If he was buried in such a place, it would be a powerful statement of continuity, an attempt by Alexander to graft his new rule onto the old, sacred roots of Persian kingship. Yet no archaeological evidence has ever pointed to such a burial. The more likely and more tragic scenario is a lost grave. The funeral procession would have been a somber spectacle in the dusty caravan routes of the East, the body prepared according to Persian rites, perhaps escorted by the very Macedonian soldiers who had chased him to his death. They would have chosen a site of some local significance, maybe near a source of water or on a gentle hill. But without a permanent monument, the location would have faded from memory within a generation, reclaimed by the wind and the sand. This absence is profoundly symbolic. The Achaemenid Empire did not end with a negotiated surrender or a gradual decline. It ended with a murder on a dusty road and a body that disappeared. The lost tomb of Darius III is the ultimate silent coda to 2 centuries of imperial glory. It represents a broken line, a dynasty cut off so completely that we cannot even point to the earth that holds its final king. In seeking his resting place, we are not just looking for bones, we are looking for the period at the end of a long, magnificent sentence written in stone, a period that was never firmly placed, leaving the story of the First Persian Empire to echo unresolved into the ages. The lost tomb of Darius III is a final, silent question mark in a saga filled with them. From armies swallowed by deserts to inscriptions carved for gods, from a burning palace to a hidden cylinder, these 25 mysteries are not just historical footnotes. They are the very fabric of the Achaemenid Empire, a tapestry woven with threads of dazzling achievement and profound, deliberate secrecy. This was a civilization that built highways across continents and tunnels beneath deserts, that commanded the loyalty of 100 nations while fearing the whisper of its own gods. Each enigma we have explored, from the fate of Cambyses' legion to the meaning of the hovering Pharaoh, reveals a dual truth. We can measure the empire's staggering scale in the stones of Persepolis and the gold of the Oxus treasure, yet we are forever peering through a veil, trying to discern the faces and the motives behind the monumental facade. The fires of conquest and time have left us with a puzzle where the most crucial pieces, the high-level scrolls, the intimate palace dialogues, the final resting places of kings, are missing. This absence is not an end but an invitation. Every unresolved question is a door left ajar, beckoning us to question the official story, to research the faintest clues, and to imagine the human realities behind the grand reliefs. It asks us to listen for the courier's hoofbeats on the royal road, to feel the tension in the throne room before a dagger strikes, and to wonder what knowledge turned to ash when the palace burned. So now the investigation turns to you. Which of these 25 mysteries lingers in your mind? Was it the vanishing of 50,000 soldiers, the cryptic warning of the Deva inscription, or the ghostly silence of the Ecbatana palace beneath a modern city? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know which historical cold case you would most want to see solved. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of the ancient world, be sure to subscribe. We are just getting started, and there are countless more enigmas from lost empires and forgotten times waiting to be unraveled. Thank you for joining this journey into the heart of Persia's greatest puzzles. Until next time, keep questioning.